Hi guys! So we're going to talk about fractions a little bit more, specifically some operations with them. So just as a quick review, most of us already know how to add and subtract, and if not, at least for me, sometimes it's just a memory thing. Because all three of these different categories have their own instructions and requirements as to how to do them. So the first one, adding and subtracting fractions, both of them require the same thing, and that is a common denominator, which also means that they have the same bottoms. In other words, the bottom value needs to be identical. And of course, we can always get common denominators by going through a multiplication process. So just to quickly review that, if I have 1/2 plus 2/3 and I need a common denominator, the quick and simple way of doing this is to simply just multiply each of the denominators by each other. So the 2 would get multiplied by the other denominator, 3, and of course that needs to go for the numerator as well. That's to keep the fractions proportion identical. If you don't multiply the top and the bottom by the same number, you're essentially changing the value of that number, and we don't want to do that. We want to keep them the same, just give them a makeover. We're going to make them look different. So the other denominator we would just multiply by the 2, and of course what you do to the bottom you must also do to the top. So going through this process, we would then get 3 times 1, which is 3, 3 times 2, which is 6, so that's 1/2 as 3/6. The plus stays the same, and then the 2 times 2 is 4, and 3 times 2 is 6. So now, as you can see, the denominators are identical, and therefore we can add the fractions. Now, when you add them together, we are doing 3/6 plus 4/6 is how many sixths. The denominator will never change in your final answer here, of course, unless you reduce it later on. But that's essentially what you're doing. It's a total amount of sixths. Don't change the denominator. You're not going to add them together to give you 12. It stays a 6. Now for the numerators, you will add all of the different parts together. So 3/6 and 4/6 make 7/6. And of course you can make that into a mixed number, do whatever you want with it, but that is the adding and subtracting. Now for multiplying, we do this a little bit differently. Now when we have two fractions that are being multiplied together, it's top times the top and bottom times the bottom. And there's no need to find any kind of common denominator here. So if we take the same two fractions above, if we've got 1/2 and we multiply that by 2/3, we literally go 1, so the top times 2, top to top, and that's going to give us 2. Okay? Now, as for the bottom, same exact thing. So we're going to do 2 times 3 to give us 6. That's multiplying. That's all you do. It's top to top, bottom to bottom. Now, as far as dividing goes, dividing is kind of a flipped way of multiplying them. The proper way of dividing is by saying this: multiply by the reciprocal. Now, another way of remembering that, just as a tool for remembering, is this keep and then change and flip. This is a mnemonic device to help you remember the process. So let's take a look at a quick example. We're going to use the same exact two fractions. So we're going to do 1/2 divided by 2/3. So what multiply by the reciprocal means is that the very first fraction will always stay the same. In other words, you're going to keep it the way that it is. That's where keep comes from. The next part of this is change. That refers to the division sign. We change that to multiplication. So that's going to change to a times. Now, the very last fraction that you have, we are going to flip it, or more properly, reciprocate it. And the way that that works is you just take this and turn it in to 3/2 instead of 2/3. So when you rewrite this all together, it becomes 1/2 times 3/2. And of course, from there, we can just do top times top and bottom times bottom, which will give us a final answer of 3/3. 4/4. So that's your summary of your fraction operation. So let's get into a couple examples. So we're going to find each product and then we're going to write it in lowest terms. In other words, we're going to reduce it all the way down. So here we have 3/8 times 4/9. Now, again, if you'd like to, you're welcome to pause this and give it a try on your own to check your answer and your work with mine. So the process for multiplying is top and top, so 3 and 4, which is going to give us 12, and then bottom to bottom, so 8 times 9, and that gives us 72. So now we're back into this part where we have to reduce. So you want to think of a number that goes into both 12 and 2. In other words, a factor of both of these numbers. Now, I know that they're both even, so they're divisible by 2, but I'm going to use a more sophisticated number, a number that's going to break this down a little bit quicker. And I'm going to divide these numbers by the factor, or the common factor, of 4. 4 actually fits into both of these numbers. So 4 will fit into 12 3 times, and 4 will fit into 72 18 times. Now, again, you want to examine this a little bit closely, or closer, and make sure that this is all the way reduced. Now, 3 is a prime number, 18 is not, but 3 actually does fit into 18. So we're going to divide both of these, again, by 3, their common factor, and 3 divided by 3 is 1. 18 divided by 3 is 6. So that would be our final answer. So here in our second example, we've got mixed numbers. And in order to multiply these values together, they have to be turned into improper fractions. So the way to do that is we take the denominator, it gets multiplied by the whole number, and then that value gets added to the numerator, and that will give us our new fraction. So 3 and 2 is 6, 6 and 1 is 7, so that's my numerator, and we keep it over 3, its original denominator. So if you're a little weak on this, why don't you see if you can find the improper fraction for 5 and 1/4. So again, we're going to go through the same process. Denominator times the whole number, and then added to the numerator. So I'm going to bring down the multiplication sign here. So 5 and 4 is 20, 20 and 1 is 21, and the denominator 4 stays the same. So now it's straight into our multiplying process. So top and top, we've got 7 times 21, which is 147. And then we've got 3 and 4, which is 12. Now, again, if you're not sure what number goes into both of these, what you can do, if you're ever a little unsure, is take the smallest number and list out its factors. In other words, it has factors of 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. Now, 1 is never helpful, so you don't have to worry about that, but see if any of those other numbers will go in. 12 will not, 6 will not, and you just keep going down this list. You can use a calculator to help you out. Just do 147 divided by each of these numbers until you can find a common factor. And if 1 doesn't exist, then that's your final answer. But we do know through trial and error that 3 will actually give us a common factor. So 3 will go into 147 49 times. Now this number is actually a really nice number to have because it's prime. And 3 will go into 12 4 times. Now, depending on the instructions that are given, you can leave it like this, you can leave it improper, or you may have to transfer it back into a mixed number. So if we go through that process, just to refresh your memory, we can do some long division. So we're going to see how many times 4 goes into 49 without going over. So one step at a time, 4 will go into 4 one time, which gives us, let's see, 4 and 1 gives us 4. We subtract that out. which will give us 0, and then the 9 gets brought down. So 4 will go into 9 twice. 4 and 2 gives us 8. Subtract, and that gives us a remainder of 1. Now, what this does is it actually has all three parts of your mixed number right here for you. Okay? This, the top number up here, is always going to be your whole number of the mixed number. So that's our whole number. This number, what we divided by, is going to be our denominator. And the very last number that we ended up with here, the remainder, actually becomes our new numerator. So that means our final answer in as a mixed number is 12 and 1/4. So either of these answers are fine. It just depends on the instructions of the question. All right. So in this example, we're going to find each quotient and then reduce the fraction. So again, if you want to give this a try on your own first, you can pause this video and go give it a go. Now, again, to refresh your memory, to divide fractions, we are going to multiply by the reciprocal. In other words, keep the first fraction, change the division sign into multiplication, and flip the last fraction. So before we do any operations, we need to rewrite this. So the first fraction will always stay the same, so that's going to remain as 3/8. The division sign now changes to multiplication, and I will flip or reciprocate that last fraction, which is going to become 5/8. So now, again, we're back to multiplying, so top to top, bottom to bottom. 3 and 5 gives us 15, 8 and 8 gives us 64, and now we're going to need to reduce it. So I'm going to actually list out the factors of 15. We've got 1, 3, 5, and 15. Because I'm not quite sure exactly which of those factors might go into 64. Now through, again, my trial and error process, nothing will actually go into 64, which means that this is my final answer. That is all the way reduced. Let's take a look at one more. So let's say we have this problem, 1 2/3 divided by 2. There are definitely a couple things that we're going to need to do here to get it set up so that we can do the operation of dividing. Now the first thing is we have to transfer that first fraction from a mixed number into an improper fraction. So again, the denominator multiplied by the whole number and added to the numerator. So 3 and 1 is 3, 3 and 2 is then 5, so that's going to become 5/3. Now the 2 up here is pretty easy to work with. Any whole number can always be written as that number over 1. So no trick there, it's really that easy. So we're going to change the division into multiplication. Oops, wrong color. And then the last fraction gets flipped or reciprocated, which will become 1/2. And now we're ready to multiply. So 5 times 1 is 5, and 3 times 2 is 6. There are no common factors between those two, so that is it. That will complete this tutorial. Thanks so much for watching.